Hey, how much of yesterday, BC? Because I took it. I don't know if it was different than most. I didn't really find the humor or kind of the "I told you so" moments. I went to, okay, how do we? What do I think he's saying? I'm talking about Coach Satterfield, and how do we
Okay.
get better from that? So if I start with that summation, am I in the minority or the majority with that? However long he talked, 10 minutes or whatever.
As far as trying to look for something to progress as opposed to I told you so, I
Yeah.
think there was probably a little more I told you so in some corners going on. Um, but it's always tough for me. I always say this every week with you guys. I can't gauge that completely. There's just so many different pockets of the fan base, and everybody kind of goes their own way with their thoughts on things. There's a couple things that I know the comment about the 4 to 6 yards got a lot of play. I didn't stop on that as much as some other people. I think he knows his yards per play deep down. It was one of those where you're probably talking about like, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt here where you want about 4 to 6 per play most of the time, and you feel like you're in good down and distance sort of situation. So I don't know. I don't know if that's what it was or not, but that's not where I stopped. But yeah, there's the stuff about like the run game and him wanting to be more committed to it as a coordinator, and kind of pointing the thumb back at him on that. I thought that was maybe the biggest takeaway for me.
Brian, as we kind of parse through Satterfield's comments, what was, I guess, the more concerning part to you? Was it not knowing what Nebraska's yards per play is, or was it kind of that part about talking about not being able to commit to the run game and kind of needing to do better? Like, was there a part that particularly raised your eyebrows a little bit as like, I don't love that?
Probably 7 games in, not feeling like you've committed to the run game how you want to or should, or sort of how he expressed that. And people can get that direct quote, make sure I am close enough to the truth on that. But I felt like that's kind of how it was said. That part was more noticeable or stood out to me as far as this team going forward and what really matters than the other part. I just think that's sort of the easy one to pick out of the air from the press conference, but I don't think it matters if this thing's going to succeed or not, really, that particular answer. So the run game part is interesting, though. How do you do it? How do you get yourself in the right sets to accomplish that and still present to the defense that you can do other things out of those sets? I mean, it's very complex stuff above my football brain, and I think it's all very difficult to fix sort of midstream. And so I always go back to, like, I do think about like the perimeter blocking and stuff like that, and I saw just too many cases in that game Saturday where there's one-on-ones, and I'm not just talking about jump balls. I'm talking about one-on-ones all over the field where I felt like Indiana was winning. I don't know what the percentage is, but it was high. It was 85, 90%. It felt like they were, a 175 corner was scooting around a 210-pound blocker on the perimeter or stuff like that. It just, that stuff, I think you can challenge your guys and hopefully improve at as the season finishes and really test them. Like, there's going to be all these one-on-one matchups. You got to go win that for your teammates. And if nothing else, all these guys in the locker room, you have to win those battles, and it will lead to this, which can lead to that. And I think that's what they were trying to show players, it seems like, on Sunday and Monday, how all these little things are interrelated, and it ultimately ends up with, if you're in a game or if you're, having to explain 56-7 afterwards.
BC, based on what you've seen from this team so far this year, do you believe they've got the personnel to be able to commit to the run game the way that they've talked about and have an offense that that is good enough to accomplish their goals?
I think they could commit more to it and get enough done to put themselves in manageables. I don't know that I believe they're going to ever be dynamic at it with this particular bunch at this point, but I do think there's more that you can chew off there, and I think that's sort of what Satterfield was getting at with that run game question, and getting those running backs going a little bit more, and that like the first drive of the second half up until they got in the red zone, that was the most encouraging one of the game to me, because they early on in that they settled the game down. They got some easy plays where it was like 3rd and 2, I think, early on in that drive, and they moved the sticks effectively. They chewed some clock and kind of controlled the game a little bit momentarily. And so I think stuff like that you look at and see if you can build on going into a game like this on Saturday. I don't think this is going to be an easy fix by any means, but I think you got to set your quarterback up with some nice down and distance. And then I think the QB's got to let it rip a little bit in some circumstances. I think he was a little tentative. It's not just guys not getting open. It's across the board. There's some things everybody's got to be honest about and know that they can improve on.
Yeah, BC, I apologize because I'm pretty authentic and it's always raw, and I find myself yesterday and then today or this morning, and I'm listening, and anger is the thing, and I'm gonna tell you why. We talked to you 3 weeks ago, and I gave some stats. I said 4 of 7 in the third quarter. They ran the ball 10 times for 51 yards. That shows commitment. They had the ball for 9 minutes and 43 seconds, but we're mad that it didn't generate points. Can that be kind of a thing? And then the next 2 weeks of press conferences. Now, the coaches have to share some responsibility in this too, because you can hear and understand what's going on, but you don't have to defend it in the pressers, because for the next 2 weeks, I heard we want to be, this is what we want to do. And yeah, we can score some points if we have to. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to run the ball, get out of there and get a win. Fast forward, and I was like, I'm not defending not scoring any points, but the methodology has to be in place. It's a mindset. These are the things that I said, if you want to build on the season. So in like this, it seems like in a rush to appease and to kind of be something that maybe they're not really capable of being in their best interest, which is more dynamic and getting away from the quote unquote gimmick runs. And it's like we've kind of lost the reality of what they want to be. But I feel like everybody's involved. I feel like they wanted to do that. It wasn't good enough because it didn't generate points. They weren't firm enough in it. So we started talking about schematics through the media, and now we're here and we're scrambling at every answer that they give because they don't know what's what. And there's this part of me that says, well, for $1.4 million, you better figure it out. But then there's this other part of me that says, why can't we just be patient? Right? Like, so that's the duality. I don't know if this is like you're my therapist, but this is what you're hearing. And my frustration of level, I don't want to be right. I want to get it right. I felt like they were on to something early, even though it wasn't generating points, but we didn't let it be good enough.
Yeah.
And now I think he's just shook, right? It's like, I don't care that he doesn't know what the national average is. I heard that he wants first downs and to move the sticks, but the answer sounded bad, and I understand because it made me mad. But I still don't think that was his intent, right? But two things can be true at once. For what you're asked to do, you have to be better in those situations, right? But I then I can fall back on the part where, okay, concept-wise, if this is what we want to do, what personnel and formations do I need to get us in to achieve those goals? Then I'm like, yes, that's what I'm talking about, right? Is it 2-back versus 1-back? Is it getting another run threat in there from out of the gun? Is it getting underneath center? So then I'm encouraged again. You know what I mean? That's the duality you're hearing.
Let me ask you this, Damon. What's the challenge because of the way the schedule falls, where you're playing? We can be honest about this, a completely different animal this week than you will see the rest of the season, and you are just coming off a 56-7 game. And so I'm curious, like, as an offensive coordinator, you are very mindful of the fact you just got your tail whipped. You're playing a team that can embarrass you in a hurry also, and how you balance that of how you want to build for future games or compete or, put your best forward in this game, while also being mindful of how can I control this clock a little bit? How can I work this game that my guys still feel good coming out in the UCLA and all those other games? And I know that sounds like a defeatist way to pose the question, but it's a real thought I've been thinking about this week. Do you think about that at all with this dynamic of who they're playing and then what's after that and what you're trying to build?
I do. And I that's a great question. And if it were just me and I would look at where I feel like, because I always want to win the game, right? So I'm looking at Ohio State. This is defensively because we are talking about offense. I'm like, okay, where have they been? What haven't they done as well, right? So I look at boundary run game. I look at how they align to certain formations. I kind of look at Oregon, even though I don't have Gabriel as a running threat. I look at the concepts, right? So, all right, they held the backside in. They showed a little triple. They went to the boundary. Is there a way that we can play that fits that scheme? Okay, that could be kind of like counter. And if we don't like counter, then we can do RPO and use a different back to replace Dylan. So I start there. Then I'm like, okay, if that's just Ohio State specific, is this portable for UCLA and USC and Wisconsin and Iowa? And I think it is, because those 4 remaining games are legitimate fist fights. Is what I want to do in Columbus fist fighty enough that I think it's sustainable. They have to start, BC, with not caring about what the final score is. They need 3 things. They need 3 things. You better figure out how you get your ass to compete emotionally. And if you can't get it, play somebody else. Start there, because that's the accountability piece. He's going to ask it of his coaches. The coaches have to demand it of the players. I don't care what you're getting for NIL money. I don't care what you've been. You don't have to panic, but you do have to enhance the culture. This is a culture game. Number 2 is, once we figure out if we want to compete or not, schematically, what can we take with us for the second half of the season? What are our goals? Well, our goals are to win 6 or 7 games or 8 games or get to a bowl or whatever it is, right? What gives us the best chance to do that? Let's start that this week. You guys in with me? Yes, coach. All right, let's go roll. And the third thing is stop. Don't be so reactionary. If you believe in it and it works and you know that it works, just stay with it. I don't. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's the screen game, if it's quick game, if it's whatever it is, stay with it and master that, because that's what beats them. I look at Illinois, very efficient at a few things. I looked at Indiana, way efficient at just a few things. Like, you don't have to be everything to everyone. Just be something to yourself and start there. That's the only way you can bridge, in my opinion, the competitive gap until you get personnel that you think can be competitive across the board. That's me.
Yeah. And to your latter point, I think that's what Rhule was really stressing when he was talking about the interrelated part. And it's like the bubble screen to Ja'Cory, when you're on the 15-yard line and you have a chance to make it a 14-point game, and maybe it's a different kind of game. And it's just like, if this guy takes out the safety, or if this guy does here, you see how the play works, and you see how then that play works into the drive and then into the game. And I think that goes to the point of just, there's some certain things you just have to do at a higher level. We can talk about, turning the boat over and doing all this other stuff, but some of that's just not realistic. You just have to you have to get guys to reach that other level. And you do have to get that mindset, I think, at a game like this where Rhule said this as well. I mean, Ohio State, everybody on that roster believes they're going to the NFL. You got to be have those type of players who I can play in that league too. I'm planning on playing on that league. And so if I am that caliber of player, I'm not going to back down from a game like this. And I'm not going to go in with that defeatist attitude, even though my question was a little bit. I'm on the outside of the walls, I guess, so I can do that. But yeah, I just think it's a tough animal because of who you're playing and how you're trying to find that portable stuff beyond. But it was interesting hearing your answer there.
BC, do you think because of how kind of we felt about Satterfield kind of going into the season and maybe even before that we haven't necessarily paid enough attention towards the rest of the coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball being accountable? I mean, we've talked a ton about perimeter blocking. Like, is that all on Satterfield? We've talked about, some people have talked about they think maybe Dylan's regressing a little bit or maybe he's banged up or whatever. Like, do we talk about Glenn Thomas enough? Like, do you think we're not paying enough attention to the rest of the side of that ball?
Oh, maybe that is happening, but I don't think it is where it matters, like within their room. Like, I think everybody feels like I got to ramp it up and that my position group has to be better. What can I do that gets my guys going to another level? And hopefully all your players are like that too, where you're looking inward first. And then, as they said, the nice thing is the film always brings the truth out, and you can't ignore it. And so there's certain things on there that guys saw, and there's like, yeah, it's just not going to fly. That's not going to work. You're going to have to do that at a higher level. So it should be easy to get guys' attention with all that stuff. And I think all the coaches over there probably feel like they got to, raise their game just as much as the OC. So those discussions might be happening in radio segments and all that stuff about more on Satterfield than the other guys. But I think, again, within the coaching staff, everybody feels like they gotta handle their weight here to find some solutions.
BC, what's the trick, or what's the anecdote, do you think, to continue to play the long game? Because you're 5-2, you've got a tough opponent, you're gonna potentially be 5-3. You still have a lot of goals in play while you're refining, or while you're trying to get better in some key areas. What's the message, do you think, to stay the course while you're trying to grow? Is it the individual win? Like, I'm just trying to kind of compartmentalize growth.
All your veterans on this roster have never been to a bowl game, first off. So even though the immediate reaction from some is like, they're not going to win another game. So, there's that over the top. And who knows? We'll see how it plays out. But that's in front of this team, and building beyond that and getting to a quality bowl. All that's out there for these guys. So they should still feel like that there's a lot to this season where they can put a mark on it and make an improvement for Husker football that builds into the future. And I think you just got to remind guys of that. Maybe it did change the conversation. Let's be real. Like, there was the dreamers out there, the dream of like, okay, go get 9-10 wins, who knows what can happen, that sort of thing, where you're talking about national rankings and all that. Okay, we're not talking about that right now, but you can put in front of your guys, there's a lot of things that you can mark off on the sheet for this program over the course of these last 5 games that show there's progress been made. And you got to start putting those building blocks in place this Saturday, even if it's not a win. That's why I was asked that question to you, because I'm so curious how you handle that, because there is a lot of fish to fry after that game, I think. And there's an opportunity to be 6-3 or something like that at the second bye, and then people have a little hop back in their step, and you see what you can do down the stretch in November. So I think somehow you got to get guys thinking on that level again. Like, there's still
you have a lot of winnable games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also reminding them and there's going to be people on the outside who they're going to say you stink and all this. You guys think you're good players. We think you're good players as coaches. Let's go do it together. Let's go prove that. Let's put stuff that's better on tape than we did last Saturday, and just keep building it week after week. And if you do that, there's the capability on this roster to still get to, I don't know what the win total. Let's win a couple more games, and you're in a bowl game and all that. So I think you just gotta push that ahead with your guys and hope they respond the right way.
That's Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. Great conversation, BC. We appreciate it as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, B. I just think Rhule is. I think he's a great motivator, and I think he's a good culture builder. I think don't detour. Don't detour. I trust that he'll make the changes that he needs to make.